A week after landing in the Indian Ocean, Starship is still floating. And SpaceX just made a decision nobody expected. They are going to get it. At the same time, Elon Musk posted 5 words about the tower arms that change everything about the next flight. And he put a date on Mars. My name is Felix. Welcome to What About It? Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Let's start in the Indian Ocean, because Ship 40 is still there. I saw your comments asking what will happen to Ship 40. Here is your answer. 1 week after Flight 13's splashdown, the ship is floating on its belly, intact, riding the waves. On Wednesday, Musk posted video of it with the caption, "Starship still floating in the ocean." A version 3 Starship bobbing in the sea like it has nowhere else to be. That rhymes. Remember, these ships are not designed to float. They're designed to be caught. Every previous ship that survived its splashdown tipped over and exploded, and in return sank shortly after. Ship 40 came down so gently that it did neither. It just stayed. And SpaceX has been watching it closely. The official recovery team statement says they've continued gathering imagery of the vehicle. Then Musk added the part that made headlines. Quote, "We are sending a ship out to recover Starship." End quote. They are going to get it. Think about what that means. If the recovery succeeds, SpaceX gets back the first Starship that ever flew to space and survived. An intact, flown version 3 vehicle. The heat shield that went through re-entry, available for inspection tile by tile. The engines that performed the landing burn ready to be torn down and studied. Every weld and every bracket. This is the kind of data you simply cannot get from telemetry. And before anyone asks about the legal side, because the ship is sitting in waters near Australia, the United States and Australia signed a technology safeguards agreement in 2023, and it entered into force in July 2024. It's the same type of treaty that lets Rocket Lab, a US company, launch from New Zealand, and it explicitly covers launching and returning US space technology on Australian soil. SpaceX would still need Australian permits, but bringing a Starship into an Australian port is not blocked. The path is open. So where does Ship 40 end up? I don't know yet. But if that ship ever stands at Starbase as a display piece, it will be the most historically significant rocket exhibit since the Saturn V displays. There is a spot being built right now at Starbase, and the leading theory is that it will be a new rocket garden since the old one lost public access a while ago. A display of what's happened and what's to come. Ship 40 would be just the item for that display. Now to the post that matters most for what comes next. On Wednesday morning, Musk wrote, quote, "The ship landing was precise, meaning that it would have been caught by the tower arms." End quote. So the Flight 13 splashdown wasn't just soft. It was accurate to within catch tolerance. If Mechazilla had been standing in the Indian Ocean, Ship 40 would be hanging in the chopsticks right now. That is the strongest possible endorsement of a Flight 14 catch attempt, and it comes from measured landing data, not optimism. The question we asked 2 episodes ago was how SpaceX proves a ship is precise enough and healthy enough to bring home. Flight 13 just answered the precision half in full. And the health half got its own answer this week too. Musk confirmed, quote, "This flight intentionally had much higher acceleration to test how well the heat shield tiles would remain attached at high dynamic pressure. Test was successful." End quote. So the tiles held through the hardest ascent profile Starship has ever flown. The landing was catch accurate, and on top of all of that, the FAA confirmed that no mishap investigation is required for Flight 13, despite the booster's early boostback shutdown. The regulatory path to Flight 14 is completely clear. Every gate to the first ship catch in history is now open, which brings us to the vehicle that will fly through those gates. In the night of July 26, Ship 41 received its 3rd and final vacuum Raptor. The sea-level engines are harder to spot because of their height behind the fence, but there is a good chance they are being installed as we speak. Ship 41 should essentially be engine complete. So, let's do the estimate. When can we expect Flight 14 to take place knowing all this? Ship 39 got its engines in early April and flew on May 22nd. About 7 weeks. Ship 40 got its engines June 5th and flew on July 24th. Also about 7 weeks, and that included a strange single-engine static fire, a rollback, and a launch abort with 6 engine swaps. Ship 41 is finishing engines right now at the end of July. 7 weeks from now is mid-September, but here's the thing. Both previous timelines carried heavy delays. If Ship 41's static fire campaign runs clean, late August is absolutely in play. Exactly the monthly cadence Shotwell promised, and almost exactly the August timeline we extrapolated a few episodes back. Flight 14's launch date will tell us more precisely than any statement could whether SpaceX has finally beaten the Gremlins. Gremlins is a perfect segue for this. Alright, watch this. We just moved from our remote farm back to the city, and every area brings its own dangers. Oh, look, it's the 2 dudes from Home Alone.
You're being monitored and recorded by Simply Safe.
That's why we are still sticking to Simply Safe when it comes to keeping our family and belongings safe. Some people are planning to break into a house and suddenly somebody starts talking through the security camera. Nice James Bond role there, bro. This part is actually what caught my attention. This video is sponsored by Simply Safe, and what you just saw is called Active Guard. Here's what's happening. On Simply Safe's outdoor cameras, the AI continuously watches for real threats. If it detects one, a live monitoring agent jumps in and can speak through the camera before someone even reaches your front door. If necessary, they can trigger the siren or contact emergency services. So instead of simply recording what happened afterwards, the system is built to help stop it before it happens. The rest is refreshingly straightforward. Installation takes about half an hour, everything is wireless, and you manage the whole system through the Simply Safe app. Your footage is encrypted. You decide when your cameras record, and it won't be shared with law enforcement unless required by law. There are no long-term contracts, and monitoring plans start at around $1 a day. Save 50% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for a professional monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Visit simplysafe.com/Felix to customize yours. There is no safe like Simply Safe. Try it out today. Help What About It in return. Safe and sound. Now to the other Musk post of the week, and this one puts a date on the biggest goal of all. In a reply to Peter Diamandis and NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, Musk wrote, quote, "People on Mars in roughly 5 to 7 years, Mars lander a few years sooner." End quote. Let's translate that into calendar terms. People on Mars in 5 to 7 years means crewed landings somewhere between 2031 and 2033. A lander a few years sooner points at the 2029 or 2031 Mars transfer windows for the first uncrewed touchdown. Yes. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Musk has given Mars dates before. In 2016, the plan was cargo by 2022 and crew by 2024. Those dates came and went, so why take this one seriously? Here's why this one is different. Every previous Mars timeline was announced by a company that didn't yet have the rocket. This one comes from a company that flew that rocket last Friday, landed it precisely enough to be caught, is building the next 3 vehicles in parallel, has a pad design for a launch every 60 minutes, and just raised $86 billion explicitly to spend on things like a moon and Mars base. The prospectus literally lists it. Now, I'm not saying 2031 happens. Mars transfer windows are unforgiving, and orbital refueling, the single technology that makes any of this possible, hasn't been demonstrated yet. But for the first time, the gap between the stated date and the existing hardware is a gap of execution, not a gap of imagination. And one more note on this. Musk gave a long interview to The Economist this week, 85 minutes. Starship came up exactly once when he reaffirmed the plan to launch it more than once per hour. Asked directly whether he's shifted his focus from Mars to AI, he answered that he's interested in whatever propagates consciousness into the future to the maximum degree.
In the case of SpaceX, I want to extend consciousness beyond Earth and have a growing civilization on the moon, Mars, and elsewhere in the solar system.
Make of that what you will, but the concrete Mars numbers didn't come from the interview. They came from a reply on X. Sometimes the most important statements are 5 words long. Now an update on an old friend.
And what about very old friends?
The mystery nose cone. You remember this one? The strange bracket near the tip, the pipe socket, the 6 connection holes. We speculated about a propellant transfer interface. The community speculated about a docking adapter for Artemis. Well, this week the cone rolled to Megabay 2, and observers are now describing it as a structural test nose cone. And the supporting evidence is interesting. A small reaction frame has been placed onto a casting that forms the base of a Pez dispenser, with hydraulic hardlines and valve hardware added. The leading read is that this setup will mimic the high stresses that the satellite loader experiences during liftoff and max Q. More steel has also been added to the tip of the nose, pointing to further load testing up there. So the picture forming is this. It is a test article for structural loads. And that connects directly to what Musk just confirmed. Flight 13 deliberately flew a higher acceleration, higher dynamic pressure ascent to carry more payload. If SpaceX wants to keep pushing in that direction, they need to prove on the ground that the nose, the payload bay, and the Pez loader can take it. That's likely what this article is for. Is that the final answer? Not officially confirmed. The connections at the tip still don't have a stated purpose, so a fueling or docking role for that specific hardware isn't dead. But structural test article is now the confirmed category. What do you think? Does the load testing explanation cover those 6 holes, or is there still more to this cone? Let me know in the comments. At Pad 1, the old ship quick disconnect arm has been removed from Tower 1. The Buckner LR-11000 lowered it to the ground on Monday, where it's headed for demolition. Parts for the new QD arm are already staged at Sanchez, right next to the base, ready for construction. The Tower 1 rebuild has reached the arm swap stage. And at the Cape, it is now official through all channels. The final module of Slick 37A's Starship Tower has been stacked. The tower we watched go from Module 6 to topped out in 11 days is complete, and outfitting comes next. So, what does this all mean? A ship floating in the Indian Ocean, about to be recovered, that landed precisely enough to be caught, tiles that held through the hardest ascent ever flown, a clean bill from the FAA, the next ship taking its final engines, and a Mars date backed for the first time by hardware that actually exists. Every thread runs through the same needle. Flight 14 and the first attempt in history to catch a Starship out of the sky. The ship that would have been caught is floating in the ocean. The ship that will be caught is sitting in Megabay 2. Excitement guaranteed. Yay, you've reached the middle of the video. You made it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching and liking the video. If you're among the 40% who haven't subscribed yet, and there was at least one video you learned something new from, it would mean the world to me if you did. It is free, and it genuinely helps more people find my channel. Want to make my world even easier? There is only one place you'd rather be, the Y Members Club on Patreon and right here on YouTube. Click the card or the join button right here under the video. You are the reason we keep doing this. Thank you so much. You rock. Rocket Lab just announced that the company will add another launch site to its portfolio. It's located in one of the wildest, most remote corners of North America, Alaska. Thinking about Alaska, you likely picture snow, bears, and an endless wilderness, but most likely not rockets. So why does Rocket Lab make this move? The answer lies somewhere between physics and money. Last week, the US Space Force handed Rocket Lab a contract worth up to $266 million. That's the money part. This firm fixed-price order is for a run of suborbital launches. 12 of them are already locked in, but there is an option for 6 more launches on top. The first flight is set for no earlier than the end of this year. Most of these missions will fly from a brand new Rocket Lab launch pad at the Pacific Spaceport Complex on Kodiak Island. This addition makes Alaska the 3rd launch site alongside Rocket Lab's home turf in New Zealand and its 2 pads over in Virginia at the Wallops Spaceport. The paperwork is not quite specific about which rocket actually does the flying, but there is really only one vehicle in Rocket Lab's hangar that fits the bill. Ever heard of HASTE? HASTE stands for Hypersonic Accelerator Suborbital Test Electron. Yeah, that's a mouthful, but it explains quite clearly what this rocket is all about. Take Rocket Lab's Little Electron rocket. That is the one that normally transports small satellites to orbit. But the HASTE variant has a different focus. It's a heavily modified version of Electron that is not intended to circle the globe. Instead, the mission profile is to launch test hardware fast, high, and then straight back down, a suborbital flight. Simply up and down again. You can think of HASTE as a delivery van for hypersonics. Those are devices that fly faster than 5 times the speed of sound. That is just the kind of tech that both weapons programs and missile defense teams are desperate to test over and over. And HASTE has flown a perfect record since its debut back in 2023. One question still remains though. Why Alaska? Why bother to go all the way north to a foggy island where the neighbors are Kodiak bears? Well, bear with me. When a rocket launches, it can't just fly off in any direction it likes. You can point it only out over the open and empty ocean. Never over cities, never near people. Too risky. What if it fails? What if it crashes down onto populated areas? Besides China, no one does that. This has its own surprising implications. The compass direction you launch in ultimately decides the tilt of the path it flies. That is what engineers call the inclination. Launch due east and you will get a shallow equator-hugging path. Fire up toward the poles and you end up with a steep, high-tilted inclination. Engineers testing missile defense systems love those steep trajectories. When you take that into account, you'll find out that most launch sites are simply bad for your needs. Take Florida, or Rocket Lab's own pads in Virginia. These are all built to fire east. Straight out over the Atlantic Ocean, that's perfect for the usual orbits unless you want to go steep. That would lead to a flight path over populated areas. There is a sort of a cheat that can be used, a maneuver called a dog leg. No, not that leg. A mid-flight swerve intended to bend the path onto the angle the mission needs. This comes with a major drawback, though. A dogleg maneuver is expensive in both cost and capacity. Picture merging onto the freeway, but instead of a clean on-ramp, there is a building in the way. You have to brake, swerve around it, and then accelerate again. You lose speed, so you have to burn extra fuel to gain it back. Extra fuel means extra weight, and extra weight always leads to less payload capacity. Kodiak is a perfect solution. It sits way up north at 57 degrees latitude. The island is surrounded by the ocean and offers a wide range of directions you might need. The launch site offers the widest range of headings of any commercial spaceport in the United States. In fact, the site offers the full arc from 59 all the way to 110 degrees, and there is nothing but cold water below your rocket's path. No doglegs, no swerving, just aim and go straight onto the angle you want. And because the whole thing faces the Pacific, you've got a huge open runway of ocean to watch a hypersonic vehicle streak across and splash down, all while staying well away from anybody. And that's the whole secret. Kodiak isn't cheaper, and yes, it is unforgivingly cold, but it is in the perfect location. For high-tilt national security testing, that geometry isn't a nice-to-have. That makes Kodiak Island the only readily available option, which is why this quiet island has quietly hosted secret military tests for years. A fact that Rocket Lab and the Space Force can now profit from. Kodiak already has testing infrastructure. That is the reason why a new launch site can be established in mere months instead of years. Let's stick with Rocket Lab, but move over to the much more inviting facilities over at Wallops Island, Virginia. This is Launch Complex 3, the home of the company's big new neutron rocket. The one we're all waiting for. The one with the very Bond rocket-looking hungry hippo-fairing system. NSF's eagle-eyed Mika Piecharka caught the Rocket Lab crews doing some serious heavy lifting last week. A crane was rigged up early in the morning, and it had come to take some hardware off Neutron's launch pad. This contraption is the second-stage static fire test stand. Using this adapter, the company can perform upper-stage testing right on the launch mount. Kind of like when SpaceX static fired upper stages on the OLM after they lost the Massey test stand during the Ship 36 explosion. With the difference that this is intended, not a fix. Soon, the crane hoisted the static fire test stand clean off the pad in a slow, controlled 180-degree swing. After about 9 minutes, it set it down just to the right of the pad. But there was no transport trailer or SPMT waiting for it. From the looks of it, the stand will stay nearby, ready to be used in further testing in the future. But there is another intriguing possibility. This move could have been part of the preparation for mating the actual Neutron second stage, a moment the whole space industry and space fans alike are waiting for. I'll keep watching this closely and let you know as soon as something moves here. Let's leave Wallops eastward and move on over to Spain, to the Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex. Never heard of that? You are not alone. This is one of the quieter NASA sites, but at the same time, it is one of the most important. Let me explain. Sending your spacecraft to orbit and beyond is one thing, but once it's out there, you still have to be able to communicate with it. And last week, one of humanity's most important pairs of ears came terrifyingly close to burning to the ground. Spain right now is living through some of the worst wildfires in modern European history. It suffered 3 brutal heat waves back to back, a national emergency was declared, and over 300,000 people evacuated across Spain and France. Sitting right in the path of the flames about 65 kilometers west of Madrid is a place every single deep space mission leans on, the Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex. And on July 24th, the fire reached it. NASA pulled all 90 people off the site, and then came the sentence nobody wanted to read in an official statement. The wildfire has passed through the complex. It was not a near miss. Instead, the flames rolled across the grounds where 6 giant radio dishes have been listening to spacecraft since 1964. Amongst them, a monster of an antenna 70 meters across, about as wide as a football pitch, weighing around 2,700 tons. The weight of 7 fully loaded jumbo jets balanced on a single swivel. But why does one dish farm outside Madrid matter this much? Here's the slightly nerve-wracking design choice. NASA's Deep Space Network has just 3 sites. This one in Spain, one at Goldstone in the California desert, and one near Canberra in Australia. They're spaced almost perfectly evenly around the planet, roughly 120 degrees apart. This spacing is the trick. As the Earth spins, one side is always in view of whatever spacecraft you're trying to reach. And that's what ensures there's no moment where NASA goes deaf to a deep space probe. This system is what is holding up every conversation we have with Voyager, with the Mars rover fleet, essentially with everything past Earth orbit. If you take away one of these 3 stations, even for a few hours a day, you punch a hole in the coverage that the other 2 have to scramble to fill during the times they have contact. This is not an option, not even for a day. And Madrid isn't just any station. It can combine its 6 dishes to form a virtual mega dish. And that is why we still have contact with the Voyager probes. As they drift further and further away, their whisper of a signal gets so faint that only this configuration can still pull the science data down. But fortunately, we can end with good news. When NASA's team got back on site for a first look on July 25th, the early word was about as good as it could get. Damage to the pavement and the scrubland around the dishes, but no significant structural damage to the antennas or the buildings themselves. The fire ran right up to the hardware, and the hardware survived. A fuller inspection still has to happen, and the site won't just flip back on overnight, but the dishes appear to have made it. Madrid should soon be fully back up and running, and has already started up again, at least partially. So everything is fine, but it shows how delicate this deep space network really is. One bigger problem is enough. Time to update the system? You tell me. And that's it for today. Smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm, and this is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. Our all-time favorite Raptor engine design and countless others are there for you to explore. Click the card or the US or worldwide link in the description. History is being written in real time. If you want to catch other historic stories from recent weeks, click the video on screen and continue the journey now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Yoo-hoo!